Lingua Brutalica is a podcast that uses ethnographic interviews to study language use in the extreme metal community. We are studying a music scene known for its love of themes and topics generally considered offensive, and it is likely that some episodes will touch on topics or opinions some listeners may find tasteless or ethically problematic. Ethnographic researchers aim to adopt the interviewee's point of view so that we can draw out and study the attitudes, beliefs, and practices that are important to them. We want to make it clear that in presenting these conversations here, we do not endorse any of their content. Our aim is to explore the thought processes behind language use in this long-running, international, and yet understudied scene. Hi, and welcome back to Lingua Brutalica with me, Jess Crook, and my co-host, Wes Robertson.
Hello.
On the podcast today, we're joined by Stan Liszewski of Terminal Nation. Thanks so much for making the time to chat with us about your lyrics.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So let's dive right in. How would you describe Terminal Nation's music? What genre would you say it falls under generally?
So I would say it probably leans more hardcore than anything else. I know we get comparisons to grindcore and death metal, and all those comparisons are fine. We do pull a lot of influences from those worlds. I would say that Terminal Nation is a hardcore band that leans death metal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we certainly did see when we were looking across different articles that have featured you. You've been described in a lot of different ways. I think we've seen grindcore, hardcore, death metal, bunch of different labels, even metalcore I think I saw a couple of times. So okay sure. Generally leaning yeah. So generally leaning hardcore though. Okay, cool.
So was hardcore how you got into metal music, or what attracted you to metal in general early on?
So I would say hardcore was definitely like my gateway into metal music. I started off in like my formative teenage years discovering punk rock, and through there more aggressive visceral hardcore, and then through there I think maybe 2009 or so through more metallic sounding hardcore bands like Weekend Nachos, Integrity, Pulling Teeth, stuff like that. I was kind of opened up into the death metal world. So then I got introduced into like your Napalm Deaths, your Obituaries, Benedictions, Bolt Throwers, and things like that. But definitely started more punk and just got to be more, a crescendo into more metallic leaning music.
When you say introduced, how did that happen? Was it just like through searching, or did your friend group move it from punk into metal kind of circles, or?
Yeah, so I lived, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the geography of where I'm at, but I'm in Little Rock, Arkansas, but in my teenage years, I lived in a suburb of Little Rock, which is like in the Bible Belt of the United States, a very conservative, small town. So there wasn't like a group of punk rockers at my school. I was kind of the odd man out, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
There were some like alternative kids who were into like skating and maybe your new metal, radio rock kind of stuff. So I vibed with them because they were the closest thing to fit what I was into. But basically kind of nerding out and doing a lot of research online into punk, the history of punk and stuff like that. And from there, I found a local scene in Little Rock, but I kind of had to actively seek it out. It wasn't like there was just a punk circle that I could just join, not locally anyway.
How did you even? Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
How did you even like find punk then, if there wasn't like a scene?
So I think if I look back, I want to say a lot of it has to do with part of the circle of friends I ran with being into like skating, and the skate, punk music and skate culture kind of go hand in hand, whether it be your Tony Hawk Pro Skater video game.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, classic.
Or like your skate videos, but I would hear these, obnoxious sounding, snotty, really pissed off bands on there, and I'm like, yo, I this is the kind of music that I like. And in your skate videos, they would have the soundtrack listed in the credits at the end of it, or in Tony Hawk Pro Skater game, you would see the name of the bands. And so I'd go online and look for more material from those bands, and then from there it kind of snowballed. I would see that, hey, this band is on Epitaph Records, Hellcat Records, whatever. And in the earlier days of the internet, the early 2000s, a lot of those websites would offer like Epitaph specifically, they would have a free song of the day. So every day they would put up one song from their catalog, and you could download the MP3. So I would do that, and then in a week or 2 weeks, I'd have a full burned CD of 14 random punk bands, and I just put that on my Walkman and go skating. So I had to do a lot of digging, searching. It wasn't really something that I just kind of fell into locally. The aesthetic and the vibe and maybe the attitude was here locally, but the actual sonically punk music was something I had to actively seek out just from surface level knowledge of like skateboarding.
So was it just the sonic aspect of like punk and hardcore that drew you in, or did lyrics play a role at all in your initial attraction to the genre?
It was definitely both. So I came to Arkansas as a young teenager. I did not feel like, I felt like I didn't belong here. I was in a predominantly white school, and being one of the few brown kids, I felt like I didn't belong. I dealt with a lot of I've always been an outcast, whether because of ethnic or racial type of things, or how I dressed, or just being the new kid in general can be hard. So a lot of those things, I always felt outcast. I always felt like I didn't belong here. And there's a lot of that energy in punk rock. And so I really connected with that, kind of being the outsider in society in a macro level, or on a micro level, just being the outcast in the town that I was in. So a lot of that connected, like sonically, lyrically, just kind of being frustrated, pissed off at the system, feeling like you don't belong. I really, really connected with all of that.
Was that true for when you got into the more like death metal stuff as well? Because you mentioned Napalm Death. That I guess punk and Napalm Death lyrics have some overlap, but Obituary is quite distinct from say a punk band and what they're doing. Was that more sonic, or did you like what they were doing as well? Were you interested in what they were singing?
Yeah, so I think Napalm Death to me is like the happy medium. I get the visceral, like sonic instrumentals and song structure of like death metal, grindcore, something. It sounds very, very pissed off, but lyrically, and then their subject matter also pulls from a very like a socially conscious, like being frustrated with the world around them. That Napalm Death and Bolt Thrower as well are two bands that I really, I think, in my opinion, are perfect bands. Your Obituaries, your Cannibal Corpses, I enjoyed the music, but I in a lot, and I'm a fan of horror movies and things like that, but it's not my go-to in terms of like if I were going to sit down and write lyrics, I probably wouldn't go to killing X person or a lot of that just feels real tired, real tropey. It's not something that I can connect with a lot. Whereas Napalm Death, even if it's told in a more metaphorical fashion, I can connect with that a lot more than I could with more gory and violent lyrics and death metal, if you will.
Did it feel tired and tropey the first time you encountered it, or is that like your feeling now?
No. So, I think it was fine. To be honest with you, I think my discovery or my introduction into death metal, like I liked it because it was just so much more intense than some of the punk and hardcore that I was used to. And then but you can't. I mean, a spade, calling a spade, you can't understand the lyrics anyway. But when you dig a little deeper and find out that the lyrics are about, you know, killing women, and I'm just like, oh, I'm not with that. I don't really connect with that, or even just a lot of gory stuff. It just at first I was cool with it because I really didn't know a lot of the deeper below the surface lyrics of death metal bands. I was just like, oh, this is cool, and some of it's cool. Like one of the first bands that I was ever introduced to, I remember, was at the skate park here in Benton, and a dude put on the Black Dahlia Murder, and the song specifically was Closed Casket Requiem, which I think maybe from their second album. But it's so fast. It's really fast, and it sounded like there was two vocalists. It just blew my mind. And then, unless I'm mistaken, I think that like the lyrical themes, I went home and maybe looked the lyrics up online. And the lyrical themes is like about a dude turning into a werewolf at night. I could be wrong, but I think that's what I gathered from that. Or maybe it's like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing. But I was like, well, this is cool. It's like, it's a little weird because I was used to more like your Dead Kennedys type of lyrics, just very reality based. Whereas, you know, this Black Dahlia Murder was cool. Like the music was awesome, but it was based in fantasy, and I found that cool too. You know, so I was okay with it. It just it wouldn't be my go-to, if you will, especially about for my writing style.
Okay. And so through these experiences with lyrics, did you kind of solidify any kind of ideas in your mind as to what makes for like identifiably metal lyrics?
So I came into metal through hardcore, and the ethos of that, like I said, I think there's probably a very debatable argument to be had that Terminal Nation is a death metal band. I say that we're a hardcore band, but I'm not mad if somebody calls us a death metal band. But I've always I've always been firmly in the world of hardcore punk. A couple of my favorite bands, Infest and Left for Dead. Those are two of the bands that in my opinion were like the blueprint and the staple to starting Terminal Nation. Terminal Nation is actually an Infest song, and those lyrics are very like the lyrics to all of pretty much all their songs are very socio-political, talking about war, talking about class struggle and things like that. And those always resonated with me. I mean, even as a kid, like I understood class struggle because I grew up poor. Even as a kid, you know, I remember walking into my 6th grade class and seeing, you know, the September 11th terrorist attacks happening, and then the war that I mean immediately followed after that, and a lot of the misinformation that came out about who the U.S. was you know, viewing as the enemy, and just like even as a young kid, I was like, this shit is not good. Like I'm not with this. So a lot of those, I guess, tropes I kept with me a lot. A lot of that, the general vibe was like I can make death metal music, but it can still have a deeper meaning and more reality based meaning. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the band Left for Dead. I think they had a stint in the late 90s, early 2000s from Windsor, Ontario, Canada, I believe. Okay. But a really fast, really aggressive band. But they have songs about just being frustrated at work. I think there's the song called 8 Floors Above. Hates his job, works in a cubicle, is tired of his boss, is tired of being underpaid, underappreciated. And the song is like jumping, like I think at some point 8 floors above, he jumps off the roof of his job. And I was like, I mean, it might seem silly when you compare that to you know, like your power metal band or whatever that writes in like fantasy and all these like grandiose multi-syllable words. But like I relate to the guy who's just like at the copy machine is like, fuck this job. I'm over it. I'm gonna jump out the window. Like I really related to that. Another song that they have is about animal abuse, and I guess there was a story that happened in Canada when listening to podcasts with Chris, the singer of Left 4 Dead, where he had read a story about a I don't need to get into details, but a pretty horrific mistreatment of an animal, and the lyrics in the song is if that's how you treat an animal, you deserve even worse, skin graft. And it's like talking about taking the guy's head and wrapping a rope around it and tying it to the back of his vehicle and dragging this animal abuser through the street. And like, now that does lean into more gory, I guess fantasy level based, but it's based in a reality. Relate to that. It's not like a death metal band where it's like I'm finding a victim in an alleyway who's unsuspecting. It's like I want to dish out a little bit of street justice. So I can definitely vibe with some of the more violent aspects, like if there's a meaning behind it, I guess, rather than senselessness. And I like a lot of bands that talk about senseless violence, but it's just not my it's not my go-to, if you will.
Outside of these kind of thematic issues, are there elements of like how an idea is explored, or like the words that are used, the phrasing that you think makes metal lyrics good? Or conversely, are there things conversely, not controversially, conversely, are there things that you find in metal that you feel make a song that could have been good bad based on how the language appears?
Sure. So like in my writing, there's two barometers of measurement that I use when I lay out a song to decide if it's good or not. I think lyrically, the lyrics have to be good. They they can't be hollow. They have to be saying something. But at the same time, in terms of the cadence and everything like that, like one thing in metal that I think is a little bit different than maybe punk is that the vocalist, their voice can be, or maybe should be, used as like an additional instrument as well. So it adds, rather than just like in hardcore punk, you can kind of get away with, for lack of a better term, just like talking and yelling over some instruments, and that's fine. Like that's part of the charm of it, and with some of the bands. Whereas metal, there's a lot more precision involved in terms of like your cadences, your vocal patterns, your execution. So it makes things a little bit more challenging, I think, being in a band that kind of leans more death metal. When you're trying to say something, but you've got to fit it within like these specific parameters, because all day, like I could be scrolling through Twitter, I could be watching the local news, I could be driving down the street, and I see something that just like kind of aggravates me, or hear about something, a news story or an issue, or see something firsthand that happens, and I have like a great line lyrically that pops up in my head. But the challenge is taking that line and like molding it to fit within a Terminal Nation song. So I think two things that are really important are, like, obviously great lyrics, and you can have great lyrics without you can have great simple lyrics. I think that's what we do well, is it doesn't get too smart for our own britches, if you will, to use some Arkansas terminology. It's very grounded and based in reality, but I also think it says something impactful. I think I'm kind of blessed with the gift to gab a little bit, in a way to I guess I have a good way of phrasing things. Like I have a good way of taking a message and executing it in a way that'll work within the medium of a song.
And has that always been your approach, to kind of draw on your everyday experience and just lines that you come up with as you're kind of moving through your life, and integrate that into like a song structure? Or has your kind of songwriting style or your lyrical style changed over time?
No, I would say it's been pretty consistent throughout my entire time of writing music, writing lyrics, is come up with the lyrics. My bandmates are wizards behind their instruments. So a lot of times we'll be working in tandem, but separately. And I'll be working on lyrics and they'll be working on songs. And I'll have, we did this with Holocene Extinction, our full-length LP that came out a couple of years ago, where I had maybe 10 to 15 different ideas of lyrics. And then they together in practices, we came up with 10 to 15 different structured instrumental songs. And then I would take the ones that I thought sonically fit the vibe that I was going for, and then I'd have to, take out lyrics, change words, do whatever I could to kind of piecemeal it into that song structure. But I've always kind of written what I wanted to write, and then tried to find a way to fit it into the actual music, if that makes sense.
So process-wise, then you write lyrics that there's no music for yet, and then your band makes a song, and you kind of try to fit it into the song. Is that sort of? Yeah,
pretty much. I'll kind of go off on a subject, and I'll just start writing. And it obviously there's going to be more lyrics than would fit in that song. So then I got to trim the fat, make alterations. It's definitely, from what I understand, a much more unique approach than I think a lot of other bands do. But I also, that's just the way my brain works. I have a little bit of some would call it some neurodivergent issues. So like when I don't know if issues is a word, but I deal with some neurodivergency, if you will. And so like when I get to writing on a subject, I just go off, and then I'll be like, this is song one. Obviously, it's not the final draft. Once the instrumentals are created, I'll have to start picking apart the pieces and making it work within the structure of the instrumentals that are written.
So how does that editing process go? Like, how do you decide what stays and what goes?
Oh, it's painstaking for sure. A lot of times, I'll try to find. I want to try to keep in the lines that are most impactful. If you're familiar with our catalog, some of the like the most impactful lines, they're not spoken, but they're enunciated more. They're easier to understand, if you will, than some of. So I like to really highlight like the lines that I think are most impactful, the lines that I think encompass the vibe, the message that I want to get out there. I try to enunciate those as much as possible. You could probably tell when you listen to some of the songs that, I understand this was very coherently stated. That's all that's all a decision in the writing process. But it's difficult. When I do that writing in my head, as I look through my lyrics, nothing is throwaway material, but you just you can't keep everything, and I don't want it to be word salad for sure. So I have to do a lot of fat trimming, and sometimes when I trim the fat, that makes it to another song. I keep it in a vat of lyrics or lines that I like, and I'll just if it doesn't make the cut on one song, it'll hit the cutting room floor, and then I might save it for another track one day.
Let's go like one step back. If you have a lot of songs potentially written, when your band first gives you a song, how do you even decide which song to start cutting fat from? Like, how do you say which lyrics are going to go in that song?
Yeah, so when I say that they write the instrumentals. I mean, we have practices where we're all in the same room. So I'm helping with the writing process.
Okay.
So like as we're writing it, I can kind of be like, I have that song about the pharmaceutical industry, and this riff kind of
Mhm.
It connects with whatever. But I sit in on the writing process, chime in. I add my take, whatever. And as the song starts to grow, I kind of already have an idea of which like topic, which bunch of lyrics that I could probably combine it with.
Okay. And you just mentioned earlier that a lot of the lyrics that you produce, when singing, I guess you call it, are quite
Sure.
like audible and intelligible, right? Is that important to you, that like the listener can actually understand exactly what's being said?
Growing up from punk and hardcore, I think I would say yes. Like I said earlier, some of the more impactful lines, I try to make them more audible or more easily understandable. And also, I think there's so I love death metal. I whatever, but there's something to be said about when, especially if it's a very impactful line or a line that's important to me, or a line that I think is particularly delivers a message that kind of encompasses what I was feeling when I wrote it. I think there's something to be said about executing that in a very organic way, where I don't just sound like a robot or a machine or some primordial beast or whatever, but like you can actually feel some humanity in that. So as opposed to sounding like like some sort of animal when I'm it's enunciated in a way that you can tell that there's a level of humanity attached to it. It's enunciated in a way where you can kind of feel the emotion a little bit more and understand what I'm saying. I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know if I do that intentionally or not, but it comes out. It does certainly come out that way.
So speaking then of what you're actually kind of saying, we want to start talking about your specific lyric choices with a bit of a broader question that we usually do, which is thematic, because Encyclopedia Metallum lists your band's lyrical themes as anti-fascism, anti-capitalism, and anti-authority. Before we ask about these themes, do you agree with this summary?
Yeah, I mean, on the surface level, yeah, I could see. Hey, we do touch on those lyrics, yes, yeah.
So I guess, how early on as a lyricist did you decide that this is what you want your songs to be about? Like, was this the topic that you first started writing about when you first decided to become a lyricist?
For the most part, yes. Like I said, I just roots in hardcore punk. I've always kind of had this, fuck the system kind of mentality going into everything that I do. And when Terminal Nation first started, it was, I don't know how deep y'all have gotten into our discography, but if you listen to like that demo or that first 7-inch, it's almost like just a straight up hardcore punk band. So it's, the lyrics are a lot easier to understand, but as we progressed, we had another member join our band that came from a more metal world, and he brought more sonic influence into it, and so it got heavier. And as the instrumentals continued to grow, like, I guess, get heavy, progress and get heavier, and the songwriting evolved a little bit, I wanted the lyrics to evolve too. So I've always thought of this band as being like my outlet, if you will. The lyrics have always been aggressive, have always been confrontational, but in the last couple of years, they've gotten significantly more amplified. But this has always been a band that has been challenging and confrontational, I think, especially in the area that we're from.
And was there any difficulty in being as politically clear in your writing as you are? Like, were you ever worried at all about like pushback from direct lines like, the system is not broken, this is what it was always meant to be, or death to all fucking bootlickers, shaking the hand of your own class traitor? Like, have you encountered people saying that metal lyrics shouldn't offer these kind of clear political messages or stances? Or on the other hand, does that kind of stylistic foot your band has in the hardcore scene kind of make this approach more natural and welcome?
So it's a little bit of both. As a hardcore band, those I mean, even as a hardcore band, those lyrics can still be pretty confrontational. But especially as a metal band, those lyrics are extremely confrontational. Now, we're from Little Rock, Arkansas. We're like in the Bible Belt, so there's in person, there's been a little bit of pushback. I think some I want to say 2019 or so. We got into a little bit of a online feud, if you will, with one of the local hyper conservative politicians in this area, and a lot of his followers are a part of a kind of a white nationalist group, maybe a couple hours from Little Rock, and so there was threats of coming out to our shows and kicking our asses, and I think or protesting our shows or whatever. And sometimes when push comes to shove, some people, for lack of a better word, aren't about it. But I think, and I tend to forget this about myself. I've always been critical of myself. I've always kind of felt like an outsider, but sometimes I forget that I'm like a big 300-pound dude that can kind of be intimidating. And one of these guys came out to our show, I think, to confront me, and it nothing came of it. He left very quickly. I think when he saw me in person.
He didn't Google you.
Yeah, maybe not, or maybe he did, or maybe it's I don't know. Maybe I'm not as intimidating via pictures, but there's that. It was kind of funny. I mean, it could have been a real scary thing, and since then it hasn't escalated in person, quite like that. I think, and also, we maybe not the smartest move to come to one of our shows where a local show where we have our fan base there. So if it's like, if you want to have some sort of physical confrontation with me, might not be the best place to do it. You might want to meet on neutral ground or something like that. My fighting days are way behind me for sure. But if somebody wanted to fight me, a termination show would probably be the last place you would choose, because you're going to be outnumbered in that room. But yeah, so there's been a little some in-person pushback, and like I said, it never got extreme, although there was some threats of it, and there was a little protest or whatever, or a call for protest to some of our shows, and it kind of dissipated. And with the beginning of the pandemic and shows kind of being non-existent for a little bit, that kind of dissipated, and I think they've found other people to direct their frustrations to. But like online, every now and then, there's been folks that'll say, "Hey, I wish you guys would keep politics out of it," or whatever. And here's the thing: I know there's people in some bands that write music for other people, and while I do write music, speaking in defense of other people, my music is my artwork. It's my outlet. I don't give a fuck if anybody likes it or is happy with the subject matter, because it ain't for you. I'm writing these songs for me. So if you think that this subject matter doesn't belong in metal, well, tough shit, because this is what I'm doing. So if you don't like it, don't listen to it, don't support it. That's fine by me. But yeah, there's been pushback a little bit online, but it's usually a vocal minority. It seems, or some people just keep their mouth shut, and that's
for the best. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe so.
Well, we touched on this a little bit earlier with kind of the parts where you do speak clearly, but on the whole, your music is in the vocals, I'd say, have a bit of a death metal sound to it. Like there's some deep growls that you're performing.
Okay,
is there kind of an irony to performing clear political messages in this style, where this screaming potentially prevents easy access to the message? Like, do you give the the listener, or I suppose the reader, the eventual reader,
sure.
the freedom to not engage with the message in a way that like a Bob Dylan protest song would not? Or like, would you be upset if someone ignored what you were saying because there's like, it's just kind of screams?
Wow. So that's a very good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that, but you bring up a good point. I guess to kind of circle back to what we were talking about on like my more impactful words, or my more I guess you could say confrontational or controversial lines. I try to enunciate those as best as possible. Truthfully, I probably have no business singing in the same way that Bob Dylan would. And that's where the love of this particular style of music, I guess, comes in. Is my vocal delivery is my vocal delivery because I couldn't sing, to sing my way out of a paper bag, if you will. In terms of that being like a little bit of a barrier or a hindrance to people connecting with the lyrics, I've never thought about it that way, but I don't think that we've ever shied away from anything in the subject matter. If anyone has ever wanted the lyrics, I know. So I think it's been a thing I've noticed at least recently where some death metal bands will not include lyrics with their physical albums, which kind of is mind blowing to me. But we've never, whether you look at our merch, whether you look at our social media, whether you hear some of the stage banter in between songs, I think the message has always kind of been pretty clear. But that's a great point. That inaudible, delivery, does that hold people back? I don't know. That's a good question. Something to ponder on. I think we're it's pretty easy to understand where we're coming from. And we make sure to drive the point home with our lyrics on our merch and in the physical albums. But yeah, that's a great question. I guess I answered it. I kind of walked
yeah,
a
little bit, but
so would you be disappointed if there were hypothetically fans or listeners who didn't engage with your lyrical content?
So the realist in me, I understand that not everybody is going to vibe with everything I say. I have people that have maybe agreed with my message, but aren't so thrilled with the level of confrontation in the delivery of it. They think that maybe things can be phrased or delivered more tactfully, and sure, maybe so, but this is what I'm doing, and this is how I do it. Take it or leave it. Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be a kind of it's par for the course. Not everyone is going to fully agree. It's kind of weird. I think there's been a couple scenarios where somebody has shared the album artwork and tagged us on social media. It's oh, just found this. I can think of one specifically. Hey, just found this album. It's really cool. Love it. And then I look at their page and it's very very alt-right, for lack of a better term. And I guess they just haven't dug deep enough yet. So I think they're going to get they're in for a rude awakening if they dig in any deeper. And it might have just been, oh, I like this song, and they never listened to it again. But they went as far as to post it, and I was like, do I need to tell him, or is he going to figure it out on his own? We'll see. But it's just par for the course. I being in Arkansas, I'm surrounded by folks that don't necessarily mesh or see eye to eye with me. So I just, I know that's just part of the world of it, I guess.
As a kind of broader question, do you think that genres like metal have an ability to create political dialogues? Have you ever had fans discuss your lyrics with you or tell you that they've, led to new ways of thinking about things?
Yeah, so this is a very good question, and the first thing that comes into mind is our debut LP, Holocene Extinction. It came out in 2020. I think it was sent off to the pressing plant in February of 2020, maybe January or February, when, as we know, a few weeks later, the world drastically changed in more ways than one. But we kind of knew that it was slated for a summer release tentatively, and then the pandemic happened. Shows were not a thing, and we're like, do we delay the record, whatever? And we just were like, no, let's just go with it. So we had planned on a summer release, and the first single dropped in, I believe, the first week of June of 2020. Now, this was at a time where music seemed like the farthest thing, like music and art seemed minuscule in relation to what was going on, at least in in the United States, with the George Floyd protests that were happening, with peak COVID, with a lot of the class struggles, but primarily the George Floyd protest. It was just unlike, it was just a surreal time. And I'm like, fuck, we worked I obviously, like, this album is like a bucket list thing for me. I've wanted to drop an LP for the first, this is my first LP. This is a really big deal, but this doesn't matter. We're like right now. There's so many more important things. Can we delay the album? This is it. Like, is it? It's the wrong time to release it. Like I had like major anxiety from like, oh, the album's gonna come out, but these things, it was already in the pipeline, and there's no way we could pull it back. So I'm like, well, shit, this is, I don't know. It felt a little bit wrong to release an album right there. Just to be totally straightforward with you, and I kind of was regretting going ahead with the decision to release it in the summer, but I didn't know that things would have transpired in the way that they did. But then with the first single, and then especially the second single, Master Plan, and then people start telling me that hey, I was at a protest in X city, and people were jamming Terminal Nation. I was at a protest and people were wearing Terminal Nation shirts, and then people were saying, this song or this album encompasses everything that I'm feeling in this very moment. You explain my emotions to a T with what's going on right now. And I'm like, well, fuck, okay, all right, that maybe this was the perfect time to release it. It was weird because I didn't want, I think there were more important things going on in the world than for my band to just release our album. But our guitarist Tommy, he is Black, and before we went into the studio, we were collaborating on a lot of these lyrics, making tweaks here and there, just kind of nervous. So I remember me and him going out like the weekend and going into the studio and tweaking things here and there. We collaborated a lot. I mean, there's a song that Holocene Extinction, he wrote that song completely, everything about it. And so knowing that a lot of the lyrical content not only was approved by him, but co-written by him. And then it was a very big moment for Black lives in America and for social justice here in the US. And then to hear that resonated with people, or that, it was crazy, like protests in Portland and Philadelphia, in Texas, and people were like, I've seen like 3 Terminal Nation shirts out here. There was a couple times where people are blasting Master Plan at this protest, and I was like, wow, that's really crazy. But I know I said earlier that I write music for myself, but it was a very much gratifying feeling when I would hear people or receive messages from people, and they would say that you encompassed everything, all of my frustrations with the system right now. You said it perfectly, and I can't relate. I can totally relate to how you're feeling. You took the words right out of my mouth, and I was like, well, fuck yeah, that's great to hear. So that was a long-winded way to answer your question, but I think that's the best way that I've seen it tied to the larger picture, if you will.
No, that's awesome.
Sure.
Thanks for sharing with us. Yeah.
So as for your writing itself, kind of looking at it as a whole, we noted that the style's maybe something we can call a bit minimalist. Like there are words, like Holocene Extinction. Holocene's pretty out there, but on the whole, there's just not a lot of words in total on some of your songs. Like even longer songs like Death for Profit, that's like longer, it's just over 3 minutes. And there's 126 words compared to like an average metal song being, a bit longer, maybe around closer to 200 words. And the style of language is generally pretty accessible. Like the song Orange Bottle Prison begins with, I can't escape, lock me up, lose the key, let illness consume me, consider this my guilty plea, I've become my own enemy, which includes words that, most English users would recognize. Is this clear and distinct lyrical style intentional? Like, is it designed to help that kind of connection you just talked about? Or is this kind of just happened organically?
Yeah, I know it's absolutely intentional. I mean, I'm not, I don't know that I'm like the best wordsmith in the world, but I think I think you labeled it pretty well, minimalist. So it's like taking pretty basic level language and using pretty basic words to get over an impactful or a powerful concept. I've always kind of resonated with that. Again, back to hardcore and my hardcore and punk roots. That's like, that music has always been intentionally, decidedly very very accessible. Like, you can just jump in and without any knowledge of Lord of the Rings books, or without any knowledge of extreme medical terminology, you can just jump right in and immerse yourself in it. So I think whether I realize it's intentional or not, I mean, that's definitely how I like for it to be. I don't want I never wanted any mystery in my lyrics. I more lately with our upcoming album, I've been toying with a little bit more metaphorical things, but it's still about subject. But for the most part, you're not going to find a whole lot of metaphors in my writing. It's pretty straightforward and pretty simple. And I think that's 100% a intentional move on my end.
And following on from there, another kind of stylistic choice that stands out quite a bit is your use of repetition. So, for instance, cognitive dissonance repeats fear-based way of thinking, cognitive dissonance 3 times to open. Arsenic Death has the line extinction of mankind 4 times. And songs like Holocene Extinction or Master Plan repeat their track title names multiple times. So what's the goal of this kind of repetition?
I think part of it might be maybe it's part of my ADD. I know that having repeating things helps me absorb better, I guess. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know that until you pointed this out, I don't know that I realized that. But also, I feel like the lines that I do repeat are some of the more impactful lines. So maybe it's just maybe it's my thought process of wanting to like drive this point home. Like, I don't want this particular line to kind of get lost in the shuffle of the rest of the song, maybe. And it's just my way of like highlighting it out, is just repeating it 3, 4, 5 times to make sure it gets heard.
Right. And then, like, how do you choose when that line is kind of good enough to repeat, or perhaps to like rephrase appropriate for repetition?
Sure.
Like, what makes like fear-based way of thinking okay, but which side will you be on not?
Oh, that's a good example there. It's probably finding some sort of middle ground with it being an impactful line, and then B, taking that line and twisting it, and making it malleable enough to fit into the structure of the song. So kind of finding a happy medium there. So the lines that you mentioned may not have started as those lines. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I think the general idea was there, but then I'd have to kind of twist and mold it to be able to fit in the song. So it's probably the repetition probably comes from what cadence works best, on top of it being like a good enough line to want to drive it home. So finding a happy medium there.
The only song you've ever written that we can find without any repetition is Thirst to Burn. Is there a reason that you avoided on this song? Besides, well, the song that we should say, it's 30 seconds long. So beyond that, it's 30 seconds long. Was there a reason that there's no repetition in this track?
I don't know if that was a conscious decision or not. That track almost didn't make the album, but we wrote it and we played it, and it was just really fun. And we were like, why not? I like when music has few parameters or limitations. So yeah, we can totally have, in the midst of like 3 to 4 minute song, let's do a 30-second song. Yeah, maybe there's no repetition there because I didn't have time to repeat anything, but that might be the answer if I'm being honest.
Okay.
Oh, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did also notice some interesting patterns in your use of perspective across songs, off Holocene Extinction, as there's only 12 instances I found of I or me, and 17 instances of we, but a massive 45 instances of you or your. Is this a pattern that you're like conscious and aware of?
No, not at all. You're blowing my mind by telling me this. And it might just be, that general trope of like you're fighting the system trope where you don't know who exactly is pulling the metaphor of like the puppet master pulling the strings, and you may not know who that is, but you always hear that trope of people referring to, well, they are doing this, they doing that. So maybe that's kind of my way of saying you and I, just like a general wow, that's cool. That perspective is really cool that you were able to pinpoint that out. I might need to dig a little further and try to in my brain and try to understand why I do that. But I like that, and it might just be as simple as this band has always been a like an in-your-face, aggressive, and confrontational band. So it's a lot easier to say you or me, you versus me kind of thing, and maybe subconsciously that's where it comes from.
Yeah, well, I mean, that fits with a lot of the context, given that like the majority of the second person pronouns, like you, do appear in a kind of pejorative context. So most notably in Disciple of Deceit, with lyrics like, you took that oath to defend, but your bigotry knows no end. You've suffered because of who you love. You've never suffered because of who you love. In such context, is like kind of you there represent like a specific person or group of people, or even a kind of social type that you're targeting?
Oh, yeah. So specifically in that song, that's specifically written about actually about the local politician that we had a little bit of an online feud with, if you will, for lack of a better term. But yeah, I think it's I don't know, it can be cathartic, it can be rewarding to like it can feel good sometimes to just point at someone and be like, you are doing this wrong. You've wronged these people. You are intentionally causing grief or harm to this subset or this class of people. And I think that feels really good. I think that song is the one where I do the finger pointing the most, probably in all of our songs. But yeah, it sometimes it just feels good to call someone out on their bullshit.
We've asked this before to some people that have also had kind of like, the political, like, you are a bad person kind of you. But when you're performing these live and you're looking at your audience and you're saying the word you, does it feel odd at all? Like, you make eye contact with someone and you say, you have never suffered, like, and you're looking at them, or is it just you're just in the moment of the live shot?
Well, so it probably it does not feel awkward, although sometimes I do some, like, with the microphone and I say the word you, I do some gesturing and like point at that person. Now, is that person responsible for anything that I've said in the song? Probably not. It's just gesturing. But if I'm being honest, when I'm performing, I'm kind of entranced, And another thing too, spoiler alert, to take away some of to peek behind the curtain, I don't wear my glasses when I play, and I don't wear contacts, so like I can't see anything 5 feet in front of me. So if I've ever said in a song, "You are a piece of shit," and I pointed at you, sorry, it's not personal. I'm just pointing into the abyss.
Well, what about the opposite? When you use like I, me, or we in a song, generally speaking, is that your own perspective, or are you like 100%. Embodying a character? Yeah.
It is my own perspective. I try to. Well, I don't try. I've never really connected with the writing style of like playing a character, if you will. And I know that that's done in death metal a lot, with the exception, I've kind of teased a little bit of it in our split with Cruelty, like in Sacrificial Capital and Embalmed Crucifix. In both of those songs, I kind of, maybe character is not the better word, but like a little bit of fantasy. So am I going to the top of skyscrapers and throwing CEOs of Fortune 500 companies off skyscrapers? No. But I guess Stan in character in that song is, or would like to maybe. But for the kind of a little bit of a different layer on the writing in those last three songs that we did. And I've kind of been toying with that a little bit. As we mentioned earlier, like, you know, I can sometimes vibe with the gory, violent death metal lyrics, but like if there's a little more, there's a little depth to it. So like, would I like to throw some CEOs off a skyscraper? Not for me to say on a recording, but but that fantasy, you know, yeah, I guess maybe it is kind of a fantasy, but it's not, you know, dragon slaying type of fantasy or
Sure.
following a girl outside of a bar fantasy. Like this is like, you know, a fantasy, but from my perspective, if you will.
Well, another common feature to your lyrics is the use of swearing. So across your first album and the recent slip with Cruelty, we counted 24 uses of fuck across lines like fuck around and find out, death, destruction, and no hope for peace until we fucking learn, or as you splatter on cold fucking concrete. So what role do you see these swear words playing in your lyrics?
I don't think it's that deep. I think like I think a fuck, a well-timed, well-executed fuck or fucking can make a line a little bit more impactful. Sometimes it's an extra syllable or two to fit in within a within a measure, and that's it. That's why it's there. But yeah, I mean, I've always been like this is angry music. I've always been like, you know, I've always wanted this music to be confrontational, to push the envelope a little bit. Sometimes that's, you know, saying the word fuck every now and then. I haven't actually counted, so that number is very very interesting to me. But yeah, and that's, if I'm being totally honest with you, that's how I talk in my you know, maybe not in every setting, but when I'm sitting around with my friends and just bullshitting, for lack of a better term, that is how I talk. Sometimes I talk like a sailor. So I think that comes off very natural. Maybe it would be forced. Maybe it would be weird if I didn't curse in a song and it would come off unnatural. So I think it's probably a mixture of all of those things.
Well, just now you use the word bullshit, but actually, if you look at all the swearing across your lyrics, while you clearly have no hesitation with fuck, there's actually no other swear words that you use on any songs. Like your last two releases don't have a single shit. There's not a bitch, not a damn. The only other quote unquote offensive word of note is there's one case of bastard, and you reference hell, but like as a location rather than as kind of an insult. Does this surprise you? Do you feel that fuck has some kind of something to it that attracts you that other curse words don't?
I think fuck is the elusive word, like the top. I mean, obviously, without going into like heinous territory, you know, like fuck is like the pinnacle of swear words. I think it's definitely the most impactful. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's like the word bitch is not really in my vocabulary. I don't you know, I don't like to use that word. So in Sacrificial Capital, I kind of there's a line that says, referring back to the mysterious they, a line that says, they surround you with their dicks in their hands, furiously filling their golden chalice. And so that's the in terms of cursing, using the word dick there might be the only other word besides like you mentioned bastard or hell. The only other obscenity besides fuck. But I don't know, fuck just feels good. I think it just feels good to say, especially when you're mad. Fuck comes naturally. I feel like shit might be a little forced. Bitch would definitely be forced for me because I don't like to use that word. Yeah, if I had to pick one cuss word, fuck would probably be the one.
Is it just like, does it just have that kind of emotional impact or expressive force that the others don't?
Maybe the emotional impact, and then it just kind of comes naturally.
Okay, yeah.
Me. Somewhere between the two.
Is there a line with like too many swear words? Like you mentioned putting a swear word in to fill kind of space in the syllables. Have you ever taken one out and filled it with something else because you thought it was like kind of going too far?
No.
No.
No. Well, so, I mean, I don't want it to be like I don't want it. I wouldn't want the curse words to be like a crutch in the songwriting. But I don't know that I've consciously thought about like, oh, this is too much, or there's not enough cussing in this song. I don't think I've ever that thought. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just as simple as this feels like it works here, but I've never done the inverse and switched it up like that.
In a broader sense, though, can there be too much? Like is that a thing? Like, can there be just like too much swearing in a song?
Yeah, if you listen to a song and been like, yeah, all right, that was maybe one fuck too many.
Bit try hard or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be. I don't know that. I mean, maybe in the opinion of some folks, maybe I've overused it. I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think that I have. I always refer back to this hardcore EP from like 2007 that I really vibed with, a band called Trash Talk. They have a song called The Walking Disease, and I swear in the first 30 seconds he says fuck 10 times. And but it sounds really cool, but I never want to like I don't want it to take away from the song, and I don't think that that any of my fucks have taken away from the song. Whereas if it got to the point where there's too many, then I don't want people to be like, oh, that song was cool, but there was too many fucks. Well, then I feel like that's mission failed. So it's walking a fine line, if you will.
Another feature that appears on a lot of maybe not as many as fuck, but quite a bit in your lyrics is just rhyme. As in lines like, how could you be so naive? There's nothing left to leave. What a tangled web we weave. Or your victim card is starting to wear thin. Diversity is getting under your skin. Or even like inner rhyme line in a short bit like desire for fire. I'd say actually compared to some of the people we've interviewed here, your use of rhyme is fairly on the rarer side, I guess, but it certainly does appear. How do you decide when to use rhyme and where to avoid it? And what kind of effect do you think it brings to your music?
So I think I've heard my band sometimes described, and maybe it's less to do with the lyrics or the vocal patterns and more instrumentals, but there's been some people that have said, I mean, for a death metal band, you guys are kind of catchy. And maybe a part of that is because I'll throw rhyming in from time to time. I've got to be honest, there's not a lot of thought process put into it. Sometimes if it feels right, I'll try to build on it. Like if I can get a couple impactful lines back to back and they happen to rhyme, or they can rhyme without sounding too forced, I'll just try to build on that. But if it doesn't need to rhyme, if the rhyme comes naturally, I'll go with it. If it doesn't, I don't need to force the issue. It's not really something that I put a whole lot of thought into. If it works, I'll go with it. If it doesn't, I'll just keep it moving.
What makes a rhyme feel forced?
If I've got to use if I've got to go to the thesaurus to find another word that that rhymes, then I'm doing too much. If it doesn't feel natural, if I have to kind of think outside my box of words for that last word on that line, and I use something that's kind of adjacent to the message that I'm trying to deliver, then I'm doing too much, and we just need to avoid the rhyme altogether. But if there's a word that would come naturally in a conversation that happens to rhyme, cool, let's go with it.
So we've had thesaurus debates and discussions here before. You're in the anti-thesaurus camp?
I'm not. I wouldn't say anti-thesaurus. Like I've used a thesaurus for sure. But I don't want it to come up. I don't want it to be like, oh, I can tell this guy used a thesaurus, like that kind of thing. It would. I try to keep my lyrics, like we said earlier, pretty accessible. Like there's no difficulty in kind of jumping in and understanding what I'm talking about. You don't have to research what this word means to be able to get an impression of what's being said here. I try to keep it impactful but simple. So I'm definitely not opposed to using a thesaurus, but I will not go to a thesaurus to find a word that I was unfamiliar with previously.
So as we mentioned just before, so last year you put out a split with Japan's Cruelty. Can you tell us a bit about how this came to be?
Yeah, totally. So the guitar player for Cruelty, Zuma, we became Twitter friends, and we both had a big mutual respect for each other's bands. We were both like our bands have been in the same conversation. Sonically, people compare our bands. And we kind of built a online kinship, and with the release of our album, we were intending on going to Japan in November of 2020 in support of our album, and we were going to do a Japan tour with Cruelty. Well, obviously the world had different plans for us, and that tour did not happen, but we still kept in touch, and then we just kind of had an idea that they were in between albums. We both released albums in 2020, and we were both in the middle of writing albums. And we were just like, well, since we didn't do a tour, like, why don't we do a split? And pretty much it just happened. Now we wanted to, I know, I hope I don't ruffle any feathers here, but I know sometimes a split album can be like throwaway material for some bands, just like B-sides, extra stuff. And I didn't want to have a throwaway album, especially we were writing peak pandemic when there was no shows. It would feel, it's just not my vibe, my energy. So I drove the point home to them, and they totally agreed that we had the same mindset here. So that worked out well, that we wanted to both bring like a full album, full album quality material to the table, and make it one thing. So we collaborated on everything from the album artwork to thematically they have their themes, we have ours. I don't think they're too far off from each other, but one thing that we did that was cool, like that made this feel like much more of a collaboration versus just two bands throwing some songs together, is that I did a guest vocal spot on their song Under the Pressure, and Tatami, the vocalist for Cruelty, did a guest vocal spot on Sacrificial Capital, our side. So it was kind of cool. To my knowledge, I don't know of any other split record where the vocalist for one band does a guest on the opposite band, and vice versa. It was just something that came to fruition when the Japan tour got scrapped, and we wanted to put something out, but we didn't have a full album's worth of material.
So the tracks then, were they written for the split, or did they kind of exist before the split kind of came to be?
So Their tracks, I believe, were already written, not recorded. And our tracks, I think we had a shell of a song, and that's about it, like a shell of instrumental shell of a song, and that's about it. So the majority of our stuff was written specifically for that split.
Did the fact that it was going to be with cruelty affect how you wrote or approached the topics and lyrics?
I think like we have we're on the same wavelength in terms of like a socio-political commentary and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like we both have the same beliefs as bands. Their perspective is going to be different than mine because of where they're from geographically. But I think I would have wrote those songs probably the same regardless. I think Sacrificial Capital kind of came from in the pandemic over those, especially the peak of the pandemic, it just highlighted so much I guess just the wealth inequality in the United States was just the spotlight was on that, as you were seeing folks who furloughed from their job and had no income, and then some of the largest companies and corporations in the world were just seeing all-time peaks, and it was just the dichotomy and the contrast there was just like, that's what drove me to write Sacrificial Capital. But I would have probably written that song the exact same way, whether it was with a split with Cruelty or not.
And you mentioned obviously that you did guest vocals on Cruelty, and Cruelty did guest vocals for you guys as well. But was there any kind of collaboration in the actual writing process, or did you just more or less like write your own songs and then just do the guest vocal spots?
So each band, we of course we wrote our own songs. On the guest vocal spot, we decided, like we had talked about it. We're like, do you want me to write something for that song, or and I think we mutually agreed that that we should, to keep with the integrity of the original song as it was written, that hey, for the termination song, I'll give you my lyrics. If you don't like them, or if you have a different vibe, or if you have a different vision, let me know. But here's this, and then vice versa. So I took the Cruelty lyrics that were given to me, and I went in with those. And then I gave to Tommy the lyrics for the termination spot that I felt that he would fit on, and he went in with that.
Okay. So we've kind of covered now that you have a very, very clear sort of thematic take on what you're doing and what the messages you're conveying in your lyrics. And some of your songs tackle the similar themes to each other, like Embalmed Crucifix and Disciple of Deceit, critique organized religions, especially Christianity. Arsenic Death and Holocene Extinction discuss human destruction of the planet, and songs like Death for Profit and Sacrificial Capital obviously tackle wealth inequality, capitalism. But is there a difficulty in returning to similar themes in a way that feels fresh and new? Or do you feel that as long as these problems continue to exist, there's always more to say? Like you mentioned that you have a new album coming out, and you mentioned that you're trying some new things with metaphor, et cetera. But do you feel pressure to do something new when you return to a theme, or even to think up a new theme to investigate?
So when I finish an album, I felt this way after Holocene Extinction. I felt this way after the Cruelty split. I was like, I mean, is this well run dry? Can I continue to write about these subjects? And then I just pay attention to the world around me, and I get more fuel added to the fire. So yeah, there's times where I think, I don't know if I can keep this fresh, if you will. But I always end up finding a creative way, whether it's laying it out or portraying it through a different lens or something like that. And like I mentioned with our new album, I'm trying a little bit of different writing techniques, kind of like I did on the Cruelty split, where almost playing a character. I'm not really throwing CEOs off skyscrapers or stacking bodies so high up into the sky that they reach heaven. but yeah, so I think I'll be able to find an endless supply of there's an endless supply of misery in this world sometimes, so I can always pull from that and just find a creative way to lay it out.
But you do feel a need to at least kind of do something in a way that feels new to yourself or challenges like yourself as a writer?
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. I think with this new album, we'll probably see I mean, it's not going to deviate too much from the termination that people come to expect, but I do want to try a little bit different, different perspectives, if you will, than what listeners have been previously used to.
Mm. I mean, one song that is a bit surprising thematically in your catalog is Revenge. As in contrast to the other tracks, it doesn't seem to be about a specific issue. Rather, and correct us if we're misunderstanding it, the track is more of just a discussion of anger at an unnamed individual or group and about to commit, revenge, right? So
Sure.
What is this correct, our interpretation?
Yes, it is. So that's actually it was a demo song that we wrote, like one of the first songs that we've ever written, and I thought it had a pretty good riff to it. And when we did our first album, I didn't want to do the cliche thing where you re-record some older songs, but sonically our sound has changed so much that we were like, okay, if we do re-record one, it should be this one. And then we should add to it, so it's like double the length of what it previously was. And it sounds totally different. Like you could we have a Waste 7-inch, or it's sometimes referred to as our self-titled 7-inch, our first album. It's on there, and it's the contrast is pretty wild. But yeah, that one was more so just like it might have been. It's been so long ago since I wrote it. The original version. It might have just been with frustrations about a particular like a not so nice person that was involved in the local music scene that's no longer involved. They've kind of went on with but they were inflicting pain on some folks that I cared about, and I was just like, I would rip this fool to shreds right now if I could. And that's kind of where that came from. Yeah, a little bit different than the rest of the album, but it came naturally because I was naturally pissed off at this particular individual, and it felt right, so we just kind of went with it.
Was it tricky at all revisiting that emotional space years later?
So it wasn't tricky because we had been playing that song for like 5 years.
Right.
So it was still in the regular rotation of our songs, but we did feel like we needed to kind of beef it up a little bit. So if you listen to the original version, actually hold that thought. That song was written, the demo version was I originally started writing it about a individual that I was upset with, and I think that's where it came to be. But it was from the perspective, and this is crazy because we have nothing else like this. The original version was written from the perspective of Freddy Krueger. So like, I do
did
have
not expect that comment.
Yeah.
So I think when we wrote the demo, I was just like on a big Freddy on a Nightmare on Elm Street kick, like what in the middle of watching the whole series and just being like, in terms of your horror movie slasher folks, I think he's got to be one of the coolest, right? At least the whole like get up and the knives on the fingers, you just can't beat it. So yeah, it was written as if I was Freddy Krueger and gonna take somebody out. So yeah, that's funny that we bring that up. But that's the only time I've ever done anything similar to that. And when I wrote it, I was like, I don't know if this is corny or not. And it maybe it would have sounded better as a death metal band. I think we took out any reference to Freddy Krueger in the LP version. it's just more generic. But yeah, that's how that came to be.
Okay.
Interesting.
I did not.
Yeah.
I did not expect.
This was a repressed memory that like back, way
Well,
back into my
That's
brain.
appropriate for Freddy Krueger stories, right? Repressed memories.
Fair enough.
So I guess to kind of like tie all this together, if you were to speak broadly about, Terminal Nation's music and even extreme metal more broadly, what do you see as kind of the role of language and lyrics in your art, in the genre, and the wider scene?
Lyrics can be powerful. I think, the more genuine that you are in your lyrics, the more reality based, in my opinion. That I think those are I guess the most valuable lyrics that you can come across. Like I said, I pull a lot from hardcore and punk, very grounded, very down to earth. I talk about a lot of what I feel, a lot of the things that upset me, this, that, and the other. I understand that, that's not everyone's prerogative, but that's just always what's connected with me, what's resonated with me. And I think when you talk about things that you've experienced, that you are experiencing, that you struggle to see other people experiencing, it makes the anger in the music much more genuine.
So like language is part of the authenticity of what you do in a way?
Yes. I guess that's what I was getting at. 100%. A part of the authenticity. When I can feel the emotion and the anger in the vocalist, I know that the words are not just hollow, if you will, and it speaks to me a lot more. So I think, keeping grounded, reality based, that's what I love. I think it makes things a lot more authentic and genuine when you can feel like this person is actually lived this trauma, experienced this trauma, seen this trauma, so on and so forth.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk through your lyrics in such depth. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you both. I really appreciate you having me on here and being so thorough and in depth. I learned a lot about my own music today, so I think that's probably the goal with y'all's podcast. But I really appreciate it. Time.
We always, our interviews are so long. We hope that the person being interviewed gets something out of it.
Yeah, 100%.
And I'm a pretty long-winded person myself, so I think is the perfect mashup here.
Yeah, it's a good match.
When can people, can start getting hyped for the new album? Where can they go to listen to what's coming up and follow you guys?
So anywhere on social media, you can find us, Terminal Nation, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We will be recording a new album in the next couple of months, but we will have a new full-length album, but we will have new music sooner than that. I would like to say that the full album will be out in 2023. With pressing plant delays and the way that is right now, there's no telling. But you will get new music, 100%, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, within the first half of 2023 from Terminal Nation.
Awesome.
Exciting.
It's looking good soon.
Cool.
Thank you again. I appreciate y'all. Both take care.
Yeah, you too, man. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thank you for listening to Lingua Italica. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you stay tuned for our next episode. Before we leave, we just wanted to acknowledge that this podcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay respects to their elders, past and present.